Ramesses III ruled over Egypt as a pharaoh of the 20th dynasty during the early 12th century BCE. He inherited to the posterity Medinet Habu, a large mortuary temple at the west bank of the river Nile at Thebes, a well-preserved monument full of reliefs and hieroglyphic narratives. Many of them are about his victorious wars against the Nine Bows, that is an Egyptian iconic word standing for the foreigners, such as the Nubians and the Libyans, but also the Sea Peoples, which is a modern historic term for a group of tribes who were active in the Eastern Mediterranean during the time of the Bronze Age collapse. These Sea Peoples appear in the Egyptian and Hittite records, but there's some uncertainty about their identity. They seem arriving at the Egyptian territories from the north since the 14th to 13th century BCE. Some were sea raiders and others joined the Egyptian army, serving under the pharaoh as mercenaries. Later, though, they made war against Egypt. An early instance comes from the years of another pharaoh, Ramesses II the Great, whose reign started around 1280 BCE. He faced successfully the Sherden, a tribe which had reached Egypt in their warships, as the sources tell. The pharaoh used them afterwards as mercenaries during his war against the Hittites and the Battle of Kadesh, or even as his personal guard. Some decades later, around 1207 BCE, Pharaoh Merneptah, during his war against Libyan tribes, he also dealt with a coalition from the north, which was consisted by the tribes Equish, Teresh, Luca, Sherden, and Shekelesh. Scholars have identified these names via other ancient sources, like Hittite and Greek ones. With some doubt, though. Their origin appears to be from the Achaean Greece, the Aegean Sea, and the Asia Minor, and they seem moving towards east and south. Now, in the glyphs of Medinet Habu, these Sea Peoples are specified jointly by the broader term of northern foreigners, or a few times they're incorporated in the word Asiatics. But most often they are called singly by their own tribe names, some of which are followed by the phrase of the sea. However, these tribes now aren't exactly the same as those of the previous decades. In fact, Ramesses III will face a league of 5 peoples too, as Merneptah had done earlier. But only Shekelesh seems a common enemy, since now 4 other names appear instead: Peleset, Tjeker, Denyen, and Weshesh. First thing to see, passing through the high eastern entrance, the Migdol, is 2 scenes of Ramesses III with his subdued tribes. The left depicts captives from the south, like the Libyans, and the right captives from the north. On this right informative panel, we can read 7 tribe names and see 6 matching reliefs, since 1 is gone. 3 are just for Asians: Hittites, Amuru, and Shasu. The rest are for Sea Peoples: Tjeker, Sherden, Teresh, and Peleset, the latter with no image. Both Sherden and Teresh, though captives here, won't reappear in the glyphs as enemies of Egypt. The main temple now is decorated with narrative reliefs about the Ramesses' wars and campaigns on both inner and outer walls. Their exact historicity has been questioned by the scholars. Nevertheless, this graph demonstrates them chronologically after a relevant consensus. Starting with the Nubian and First Libyan Wars, we can see figures of the Sea Peoples as mercenaries on the Egypt side, mainly Sherden, and warriors with headdresses made of something like reeds or feathers, or even bristles, a feature of many. Hereafter, these warriors will be called arbitrarily reed-capped. However, in the big inscription of year 5 about Libya, the Peleset and Tjeker appear as enemies, but it has been considered an anachronism from the later war of year 8. In any case, we'll see even more of these mercenaries in later battles. But firstly, the Northern War. This is depicted in 2 sets, one on the outer walls with many reliefs, and one shorter onto the second pylon. The latter bears a long informative inscription for the Ramesses year 8, that is 1178 BCE. There it's described how a confederation of sea peoples, coming from their isles, tried to attack Egypt, overcoming on their way the Asian kingdoms, and how in the end they were defeated by Ramesses at Djahy and at the Nile mouths. These tribe names were Peleset, Tjeker, Shekelesh, Denyen, and Weshesh. On the left side of the pylon, Ramesses III presents his captives to gods Amon and Mut. Here, 3 defeated groups are mentioned by the pharaoh's inscribed words, Peleset, Denyen, and Shekelesh. And there are 3 rows of prisoners, the 2 with signs. The long series of reliefs on the outer walls starts with Ramesses III preparing for his northern war. There's an interesting scene in the middle where arms are issued to the troops, which include the Sherden and the Nubians as mercenaries. Then the Egyptian army starts marching to Djahy for the first battle. Djahy was a wider region, the Egypt's frontier in the Near East, near southern Lebanon. And there comes a fierce battle. The pharaoh stands huge on the right with his bow, while Egyptian soldiers in Sherden are crushing the sea peoples who are trying to flee with their women and kids. An Egyptian victory. The return at homeland is celebrated by Ramesses III with a lion hunt. Then follows the naval battle, the try of the sea peoples to invade to Egypt via the delta of the river Nile, perhaps a response for the defeated Djahy. But Ramesses III is waiting with archers and boats. Four Egyptian vessels are pressing hard 5 invading ships, managing to overthrow one. The ethnicities of the attackers are notable. 3 crews are wearing the typical reed caps. Two, however, are equipped with horned helmets. This reminds the Sherden, but there's much doubt. The story so far and the relevant depictions seem contradictory. Weshesh or even Shekelesh have been suggested instead. There's also some difference between the reed-capped warriors of the earlier land battle at Djahy and this naval one. The latter are wearing some kind of armor. The Egyptians prevailed in the end, and a lot of prisoners were caught. What follows is the treatment of these captives. Ramesses III receives them in front of a fort. Characteristic is the piles of the severed hands in the middle. But also the Egyptian scribes who record and brand the war prisoners on the shoulder. Finally, Ramesses III presents his captives to the Theban triad. Probably it's a scene for both the Libyan and Northern wars, since these peoples are named Tjeker and Libyans. After Ramesses' victorious Northern War, figures of sea peoples reappear mainly as mercenaries in his following battles. In the siege of the city of Tunip under Hittites, we can see Sherden. But also in the siege of a city in Amuru. However, right after this last warfare, the captives include figures of the sea peoples, reminding their own earlier attack at a fort there, mentioned for year 5. Finally, Sherden and reed-capped warriors are fighting at the Egypt's side during the Second Libyan War of Ramesses year 11, that is 1175 BCE.